one topic, we have had many different topics during these gatherings, and one topic or one thing that we have been working hard with and been very aware of with the IDGs is that it's a Western initiative, and we have also been very Western biased. While in the first rounds of taking framing or putting words on and finding out which aspects and skills and qualities would be included in the IDGs. And my experience from other initiatives is that this is a work that actually takes time to develop. We're making draft after draft, and now we're also working extremely hard on finding much broader perspectives on the IDGs. We have other initiatives. We have applied for money to make projects which is actually specifically aimed on countries that are not included in the former rounds. And also today, we decided when we wanted to do these gatherings that we also wanted to address this aspect and challenge that we face right now, because we want to be more inclusive. And you will also see in some of the information we send out that we actually ask for help how to broaden the perspectives. But can you say something about the former gatherings?
Yes.
What have we done?
Sure, yeah. So this is the 7th gathering that we have, which is the idea of these is to keep like the conversation going related to the inner developmental goals and theories and practices related to them. So to like keep the heat up between the bigger events that we have. As you probably know, April 29th, there will be a big event, and I hope you're all signing up for that. But this is the 7th gathering that we've had. Amy Edmondson's research. In October, we had Jennifer Garvey-Berger's research that was in focus. In November, it was Staffan Åkerblom and Gabriella Gunsell from Sweden talking about leadership in complex times. And in January, Jonathan Reams brought Michael Mascolo, and he talked about the IDG framework in adult development. And the last session was about our shadows. We had some shadow work there, which was a different gathering in that sense. And we believe today will also be a different gathering also in the format. So both content and format will be different. And also just want to say a heads up for April 7th, which where the theme will be how can a co-created open source digital platform support development of the IDGs at scale? So that's a bit of the context, and I'm sure that many of you have been, and I recognize many names here, so many of you have been part of these communities, and we hope that they give you all energy as they do to us, and also it increases the sense of us being connected, being part of a movement, and supporting this initiative in the different parts of the world where we are, in the different contexts where we are. So, but now to this gathering.
Yeah, I would just say that Jesper will add in the chat links to the events you mentioned.
Yeah.
And also a code for having 20% off of the big event, the 29th of April.
Yeah. And there's a question about the recording here. We will send a link to the recording afterwards for all of you who enrolled for this gathering. So that's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a little practical detail also, Suzanne has promised to stay a little bit when we end at our time, 5 o'clock. Suzanne has promised to stay a bit if someone has more questions, because we will try to fill this time, and yeah, that's the opportunity to ask more questions. I'm sorry about this phone, but I thought it was turned off.
It's a reminder to me to turn mine off. Thank you.
Yes. Well. When we prepare for this, I asked Suzanne, how do you want to be introduced? And I don't know, I maybe expected some work or titles or something like that. But Suzanne said, oh, please introduce me as someone who loves humans. And also our talk was a lot about the relationship to nature. So, Suzanne, I'm very happy to introduce you, and I leave the word to you.
Hello, everyone. Please look around as far as you can and give a warm welcome smile to all those who are gathered here. I have the sad news, at least to me, that Bio is not well and just sent me an email this morning that he won't be attending. So we all miss that. I hope those of you who got his allegory have read it and really have taken in the depth of what he might contribute or does contribute, just not today with us. I was going to say just a few words how this came to be. Mainly when I first saw the research results, I was a bit upset that it was so Nordic and so biased in that sense. Not that the 23 skills and values aren't absolutely precious and worthwhile pursuing, it just that they didn't include a more global view. So I suggested this seminar or this webinar. And then the one day we all met for the first time, Bio, Lindsay, Matt, and I, that was the same day Russia invaded the Ukraine. So then I felt I had to reorient the whole thing and not talk about my complaint about the biased surveys and just talk about what other Indigenous nations might actually teach us about how to be a better human being, how we could actually learn to live with each other, because they have hundreds of years of practice in some ways of how to overcome difficulties, how to share and how to learn from each other, not through webinars and practices, but by the way they are together. And so here you are. I will introduce Lindsay, and now because Bio is not here, our sequence is a bit off, so please, I apologize for that. Lindsay is a fabulous person. I experienced her as a mothering one. Not just an individual mother, but a person who carries mothering within herself. She is a Cherokee and has a Danish mother who has had the good fortune to work in cultural revitalization with Indigenous peoples across the West Coast of the US for over 20 years. She is currently Vice President of Strategy and Community Solutions for Humboldt Area Foundation, where she focuses on Indigenous self-determination in economic and climate sustainability, the topic of our IDGs as well, and social justice. She also practices her own cultural traditions with her mixed Cherokee Arapaho family, or any abbreviation of that. Is that what you would say? Welcome, Lindsay. There.
Hello, Suzanne. Does this mean that I get the honor of introducing Matthew next? I will tell you a little about Matthew's bio, but first, can I tell you that getting to talk with Matthew is a wonderful pleasure. Matthew radiates this great joy in listening and understanding people. When I think of Matthew, we don't know each other well. I described him to my husband as being someone who had a kind of joyful integrity that he brings to things. And now you will all get to experience that. In his work, Matthew is the senior research scientist and the director of empirical research, the Human Flourishing Program in the Institute of Quantitative Social Science at Harvard University, and he leads the program's community of practice. His research explores topics such as benevolent service to others, human flourishing, organizational compassion capability, and the integration of social science and humanities. I know he works deeply in restorative justice. And I think recently he'll be leading a workshop on love for the global flourishing study. And he's going to look at flourishing, it looks at flourishing among almost 250,000 individuals in 22 countries over the next 5 years. And so hopefully we'll all get to learn a little bit from Matthew today and in the future about flourishing and love. But I have the sense he has a lot to teach us, both from the research he does in the world, but also from his own being in the world.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And as you might be able to tell from my voice, I'm still getting over a cold, but I found not only what you shared, but the way you shared it to be very healing. So I'm energized despite a little bit of, lingering illness, but thank you so much. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Suzanne Greuter, a caring and courageous troublemaker who has transcended established boundaries of a number of fields, including adult development, and made major contributions to our understanding of ego development in human awareness. I was delighted when Suzanne joined our Flourishing Network that we host at our program at Harvard. And I continue to learn so much from her writings and her leadership of events like this one that she's organized for us. She's really helped me to rethink some of the fundamental assumptions I've made about the nature of well-being and flourishing, as well as leadership, group relations, and other topics. The question that I'm a little bit better able to ask now and still working on is, what might we notice, embrace, and hold that has until now been beyond our field of awareness? And so it's this constant idea of expanding our awareness through deep connection with others. And how do we know what we're incapable of knowing until we encounter others who can reveal to us or provide a kind of doorway for us to walk through and to see something that we couldn't see before. Suzanne's writing a book on ego development theory from a perspective that includes an appreciation of non-Western understandings of interconnected human growth and flourishing. She's intrigued by the variety of languages and views of reality beyond her own social conditioning, and she sees wisdom and promise in Indigenous relationships to nature and land and their conceptions of personhood, well-being, and sustainability. So I'm really glad to be involved in this conversation with you all, and especially with Lindsay and Suzanne, who continue to open doors for me. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful, longish introduction. I thought we start with a meditation. I grew up in Switzerland in a family that hunted for mushrooms, ate greens from the wild. And so I've always had nature as my best teachers. As long as I know I've dabbled in, that's an awful word. I've been with different, Zen and TM and Kriya Yoga. I practice these things, but the real teacher is still always nature to me. So I'd like to do a little meditation with you, maybe 7 minutes, and then give the word to Lindsay to talk from her basket of knowledge. And it should be, 7 minutes or so. Are you willing to go inside and access your fabulous imagination? All right. Here we are, gathered around a big campfire to celebrate the harvest season, to express our gratitude for the abundant gifts of nature, yet also to remain aware of the changing seasons, the cycles of birth, growth, decline, and death going on everywhere. Take a couple of breaths in your natural pace. Nothing to do, nothing to change. Just breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. When your mind is still, open your senses to the feast of nature. We are in a clearing of an old growth forest in a meadow spacious enough for our large tribe. People have come from afar. Gathered are the elders, grandparents, mothers and fathers, both literal and in their roles as stewards of Mother Earth. And the children, the littlest ones, are nestled in their mother's arms or nursing from the life-giving fountain offered by the breast. All the children sit on the grass or lean safe against the legs of a caring one. They have been told to pay attention and just watch in silence. They know that this yearly gathering is special. And let's not forget the presence of other creatures, 4, 6, 8, 1,000-legged ones, along with winged and stationary beings, plus viruses and bacteria who live all around, above, below, and within us. It is late summer and the sun is going down behind the trees. The air is stirring gently as the night approaches and the warmth of the afternoon fades into the cool night. Everyone watches the fire in the center in silence and gratitude for this one more day of life we celebrate together. The tall pine trees and ancient oak trees stand guard, as they have for centuries. They have encircled our ancestors just as they embrace us now. If you listen very carefully, you can hear them murmur among themselves and tell the story of our people. In their tree rings, they chronicle their joys and sorrows, periods of hot summers and icy winters. They talk about their concerns about what is happening in the world. The adults in turn reminisce about years gone by of prosperity and hardship, feast and famine, and the bitter loss of home, yet also hopeful of together building a new global village, a new home. The place is alive with sounds, a cricket chirping under a log, the gentle hum of the breeze, and now loudly the crackling of the campfire erupting with plumes of embers, nature's fireworks. Notice also the smell of the burning fire, quite sharp and overpowering everything else that gifts the world with its fragrance, pine trees, aromatic grasses, and wildflowers, even the different smells of each other. When the fire dies down a bit, you register the faint perfume of a wild rose bush behind you with its heart-shaped pink petals of the flowers. More than that, you hear the buzz of a nectar-gathering bumblebee in the blossoms. Or is she just enjoying herself being a bee? Now you notice the touch of the air and the grass is tickling your feet. When you direct your attention to how the fire feels on your face and your hands, you realize the slight chill in your back. So many senses, so many wonders we are privy to. After a long while, the flames die down and the logs start feeling hard on your behind. And you start to wonder how long before the elders may speak. After what seems forever to the little ones, I will read you 2 stories. They're the same story in 2 versions from Africa. And then Venerable Mothering One, Lindsay, will share her experience and her way of how she lives and uses stories as well to help and support ancient ways of being together and of surviving as well, since we all know how across the world Indigenous people have been vilified, called primitives, and often even tried by the Western colonizers to be wiped off the earth in various ways. So this is a serious topic because it is real. And it's good for all of us to be more in tune and acknowledge what was happening and is still happening all across the world. So I would like to listen to the story of Anansa, the big.
Yes, we're
spider.
Susan, this is Johan here. There's something maybe with your microphone that makes it hard to hear. So maybe it's something you can do some adjustments and we can hear you even better. It seems like it's when you're moving, I think. So yes. It's only when you're moving. Otherwise, we're hearing you perfectly.
And I am of half Italian ancestry, so I talk with my whole body, and
I know. Yeah. So please do, but stay away from the microphone.
The microphone is in the computer. Where is it?
It's probably in the computer. So maybe you have your papers on your computer or something. So anyway.
I'm sorry about this.
Yeah, I think it's the papers.
It's probably the papers. It's the papers. Yeah. So it's better now. We hear you perfectly. So
version 1. Once upon a time, Anansi Kokrofu, the great spider of venerable memory, grew bothered about the state of wisdom in the world. People were not looking after it properly. So far as Anansi could tell from his experience of mankind, which was not small, a great deal of wisdom was getting lost. Yet even if living people lacked the wit to respect wisdom as they should, there would be future generation, Anansi argued, who would be glad to use every bit they could. So he made up his mind to collect all the wisdom in the world and store it for safekeeping at the top of a tree. In due course, the elders say Anansi could indeed finish collecting the world's wisdom. He packed all of it into a gourd and began to climb a tall palm. Halfway to the top, he got into difficulties. He had tied on the gourd in front of him, and it hampered his climbing. At this point, his son Nikyuma, who was looking up from below, called in a shrill young voice, "Father, if you really had all the wisdom in the world up there with you, you would have tied the gourd on your back." This was too much even for Anansi, who was tired from the long labor. He untied the gourd in a fit of temper and threw it down. it broke. The wisdom was scattered far and wide. After a while, people who had learned their lesson came and gathered in their own gourds, whatever each could find. It is this that explains why a few people have much wisdom, some have a little, but many have none at all. I think that anyone trying to write about nature and growth of African civilization will quickly come to feel, as I did, that Nkrumah might well have held his peace on that occasion. The gourds of wisdom about the African past are large in numbers and multitudinous, and all we can do is listen to the African voices, and in turn to all indigenous voices. I'm aware of the rustling. Now the same story again, but from a different perspective. Long ago, people knew very little. They knew nothing about farming, tools, or how to weave cloth. Niame, the god of heaven, had all the wisdom. He kept all the wisdom stored up in a clay pot. One day, Niame gave Anansi, the spider, a special gift, the pot with all the wisdom in it. Anansi was excited. Every time he looked in the clay pot, he learned something new. Greedily, he decided to keep the pot away from the world. He did not want to share with anybody else. So he tied a rope around his waist so he would be able to climb a tall tree. Also, he tied the rope around the pot of wisdom and it hung down in front of him. He began to climb the tree. That didn't work so well. The pot was in the way. A little kid who was watching him from below shouted, "Put it in your back, that makes climbing easier." Anansi tried the clay pot full of wisdom to his back, and it really was a lot easier to climb. In no time, he reached the top of the tree. But then he stopped and thought, I'm supposed to be the one with all the wisdom, and here this little kid is smarter than me. Anansi was so angry about this that he threw the clay pot down out of the tree. It smashed into 1,000 pieces on the ground. Of course, all the wisdom got out and flew away all over the world. That is how people learn to farm and to make cloths and to make iron and all the other things that people know how to do. That is version number 2, with a more forward-looking take on where we can find wisdom. And with that, I invite Lindsay Bear to share with her take on Indigenous wisdom.
Wado Suzanne for that story. So Osio Dagwado Lindsay Bear Gohedzi Marata Julie Bear and Audie Bear, and my grandparents are Isla Parks and Audio Delbear, and my adopted grandparents are Josephine and John Spitzer. This is how we introduce ourselves in my Cherokee culture. We introduce ourselves by who we are, by who our parents are, by who our grandparents are. Sometimes we go even farther. And I can introduce myself sort of that far, and that's as far as it goes, because that's as far as we know. Because of colonization and the assimilation practices of the 1950s, my mother was one of the children who were removed from their Indigenous families and given to non-Native families here in the United States in these closed adoptions in the attempt to erase identity and erase connection to homelands, and moved out. And in fact, my husband, I'm married to John runs behind, and his father was also taken in that same era. He was taken to the boarding schools. And so we are one generation out from the generation that was removed from the last generation in which child separation was the method of genocide for our people. And as such, I'm a Cherokee woman, but I'm not a Cherokee citizen. And so my growing up happened in California on a Paiute reservation. And it wasn't actually until a little bit later in life that we were able to connect with our larger Cherokee family and the cultural elders. And I remember being so nervous. And I remember saying to them, like, oh, I'm not just ethnically, I'm just ethnically Cherokee. And Kim Shuck, the wonderful Chalagi poet, took me by the shoulders, looked me in the eye, and said, never say that again. You are a child. You're always our child. And I'm so grateful to her for that, because it was the beginning for me of learning where my place was as an Indigenous person. Up until then, I had been taught what my place was as a guest. And that's also a very honored and sacred thing. To be a guest in Native land has always been a very special purpose. And so as Native people outside of our native lands, we were taught that you wanted to be a welcome guest. You could also be an unwelcome guest. And that had a lot to do with the people whose homelands that you were on. But you wanted to work to be a welcome guest, to understand the ways of the people where you were, and respect their relationships to the land and what your relationship should be. And so both my husband and I live outside of our ancestral homelands, and we teach our daughter, who is 4 years old, how to be a guest now in Wiyot territory, which is where I live. And if you can see out the window, I'm in the redwoods, and the sun is just going to start to rise. So I'm going to angle this so you can see the sunrise. And right now the crows and the birds outside are making quite a bit of noise. And this is the time of day for us usually that we pray. We get up and say prayers with the sunrise. And so this morning, knowing that I would be with all of you, I fasted in the morning and drank our tea. And so this will be my prayer with all of you. So my daughter, Maya, is 4 years old now, and she has a nickname in our family, in our blood family, and in our larger spiritual family. They call her the Little Elder, because she is exactly as stern and funny and particular as our elders. And so she's our little elder in training. And since I'm the mother of a 4-year-old, many of you will know that my life right now is equally poop jokes and questions about death. And that's sort of all my day, is working in that, which might be two sides of the same coin. So my daughter last night was not very happy with me that I would get up and spend the morning with all of you instead of her. And she asked me, Mama, why do you have to go? Because this is her favorite time of day. This is the time of day that she would climb into bed with me and put her head right here and tell me about her dreams and any big questions that came to her in the night, and that we would talk and then do our prayers together. And I told her, baby, one of my elders asked me to get up and tell stories. And when the elders ask you to get up and do work, that's our job. That's what we do. And she said, who are you telling stories to? And I said, well, I don't know all of them, but they live all around the world. And I think that there are people who want to fix the earth. And since that's what we're told our job is, if that's also their job, then they have their ways of doing it, and I have my way of doing it, and you have your way of doing it. So this is what we need to do this morning. And she said, what story are you gonna tell them to fix the earth? She was very skeptical about this whole process. And I said, well, I've been thinking about it for a while, and I think I should tell them the story that I told you when you were born. And this is one of her favorite stories. And so she acts like she hasn't heard it. She curled up and she was like, what's the story? And I said, you know this story. Do you want to tell me? No, tell me the story. And so I think a place to start is to tell you the story that we tell our children when they're born. And before I tell it, stories for us change meaning based on who tells them, what time of year you tell them, who you tell them to. The Serrano elder and musicologist Ernest Siva, I sat in on one of his music classes and someone asked him about the song, like, what's the song mean? And he said, well, I can tell you what the words to the song are, but what it means is based on all the context of who hears it and who says it and what they do with it. And so what the song means changes. And this is a little bit to our belief that in none of the cultures in which I've lived, I've been really honored to live and work all over California. We have 178 tribal nations that are recognized here, and about 92 others that are not recognized by our government. So I get to travel all through all of these different cultures as a guest, and in none of them have I ever found the concept of absolute truth. There's not this sense that there's these platonic forms and then everyone looks to them, or we're going to argue about what's true. The phrase you hear over and over again is, well, the way we do it, the way I was taught. So from where I am right now, I can look over and see the center of the world for the Wiyot people, Doula Island over here. And if I went a little up the road, I could see the center of the world for the Karuk people, Kamin up there. And if I went farther upriver, I could see, the center of the world for the Yurok people. And they're all the center of the world. And they're all the places where people originated. And those things just get to be simultaneously true, even if they're not, my story of where people came from. And so I tell you this not because I think that it is universally true for all of you, or that I want you all to somehow take on the beliefs of Cherokee moms. That would be a very strange world. There would be lots of cornbread if everyone suddenly became a Cherokee mother. But to share that, for our family, this is who we believe we are as people. So I told my daughter that before she was born, she was with our ancestors, and our ancestors are like over there in the sky. So it's not actually a completely different world. They're still in this universe. And her spirit was there with our ancestors, and they chose her. They told her it was time to come to Earth and she could choose a family. And so she chose her father and I to come have this human experience with. And I always remind her that doesn't mean that she's responsible for our actions. She could only see our spirits, and what we do with those spirits, that's up to her dad and I. That's our work. That's our learning to do. But that we're so honored that she chose us to come down to be with us. And that when her spirit came into this world, it came to have the experience of connection, of connectedness. So the reason that our spirits come to Earth is to have the experience of spirit being connected to matter. I like to think of it not like a firefly in a jar, as like two separate things together, but like salt and water in the ocean, right? That spirit gets mixed up in matter, and that our matter is not even our own. The water we drink is the water that the fish drink. It's the water that comes down from the mountains and the clouds. The fats that we're made up of are the fats from the elk that we eat and that we hunt. That our bodies are not separate from the world, and our spirits are not separate from the world. And so, we get to be in this world in which everything is sentient. Rocks, trees, other people, and we have different kinds of sentience. And so we don't always understand what the thought pattern and the experience of other kinds of living beings are, but we know that they have spirit. And so, we treat them with respect as such. Everything has a place and a spirit here. And that's also true for us. We're not separate, but we are unique. We each get sent with our own gifts to bring. And what we do with those gifts, that's up to us. But the fact that those gifts are ours and how we're made and who we are, that's exactly who we were meant to be. That's exactly who our ancestors knew we were when they chose us. That's exactly what the earth needs. And our job here as being interconnected is not just to experience it, but it's to balance the earth. That's our job as people. We all have different ways of doing that, but our job is to balance the earth, and to do that well, we have to learn a lot. We have to learn about every other living being around us. We have to learn what makes them happy. We have to learn what they need. And that is very close to our definition of love. To learn what the living beings around you need to thrive and how you can make that for them. And all living beings. It's what we're here to do. And at the end of our lives, we go back to the spirit world, we go back to the ancestor world, and we're still responsible. So we talk to our ancestors regularly. We thank them for things. We make food for them. We ask them for guidance. And so when you leave this world, you do leave the experience of being together and the feeling of that, and that's hard. And that's hard for the people who stay here. And it's hard for you because this feeling of connectedness is such a beautiful, warm feeling. But we return to our ancestors, and we return to our responsibility to balance the earth. And so she asked me the same thing she always asks of like, do I have to do it forever? And I was like, yeah, pretty much forever. Like that's our jam, kid. Like there's no world in which responsibility ceases for us. It's our basic, unit of being. But I tell her she doesn't have to think about it in terms of forever, because we're limited. We can't conceive of that. So I tell her, just think about it in terms of 7 generations, 500 years. That's our smallest unit of measurement of time that matters. So, think of it in 7 generations. I think of you, and then your children, and their children, and their children, and their children, and 7 generations out is our timeline. And she's so comforted by this. She's like, oh, 7 generations, I can do that. And so what this means to her in her life, and how she's interpreted it in her 4-year-old mind, is my daughter knows that when we go out gathering, we go out to pick plants, first we have to respect the time of the plants. We don't get to say, oh, we want the berries to be ripe now. Berries are ripe, and the berries are ready to be ripe. And we get to respond to that, because part of responsibility is responsiveness, is that we see the world and we respond to it as it is, as it's happening. She knows that she has to introduce herself to a plant before she picks anything from it, because plants are feminine. And she also has to ask permission to pick the berries, because we teach our children very young, you don't take anything from women unless you've asked permission, even if it's plants, even if the berries are already there. And she has to tell the plant what her intentions are. I'm going to feed my family with these. And after she's done this, she's supposed to look and see, are the berries low enough to pick? Have they turned all the way black? Here we have huckleberries and blackberries. You have to look and see if it's the time, if you've been given permission, and then you can pick the berries, you can eat as much. But we just take what we need from each plant. We say thank you, and the way that she understands it is, you have to make friends. You have to make friends with them. You have to understand, because she's not allowed to pick anything in a way that doesn't make the plant healthier. Everything that we take, we have to know how to make, my husband is a hunter, he has to know how to make the herd healthier with how he hunts elk. My daughter has to know how to make the plants healthier with how she picks them. That's our responsibility as eating beings. And the other day we were in the car, and the cherry blossoms here are starting to bloom, and the plum trees. And my daughter was enraptured with them. There's clouds of pink petals. And I looked in the back seat. We were on the way to school, and she's blowing kisses to the trees. And I said, "Oh, baby, are you giving the trees some love?" And she looked at me with her very stern little elder face and said, "Mama, do not give the trees love. The trees and I create love together." And I said, "Oh, right, okay, yeah, that's true, right? Gadugi, that's what we call it in Cherokee. We work together for the well-being of all things. It's not what we do to the world." And then she said, "And Mama, I'm not just giving it to the trees we can see. You have to give it to all the trees. We're connected to all the trees. How would the trees that I can't see feel if I didn't love them because they weren't close to me?" And in that moment, I felt like, oh, okay. I feel like that was the lesson maybe that I needed to learn from you today. And I think about this in terms of this larger responsibility that we have as Native people. It sounds very halcyon to get to be connected to, bluebirds and sunrises and trees. That's nice, but that's not where it ends. We are also connected to the harm in this world. We are responsible, we're accountable to that. So as a mixed race person, I'm not just accountable to my ancestors who we lost to genocide or who survived genocide. I'm also responsible and accountable to the ancestors who perpetuated genocide. And that will have to be part of my work every single day, because that's the world that I have to respond to. And it's not enough to respond to just the genocide that has happened to our people. I have to be accountable to people in Yemen who are killed by the bombs that are bought with the tax dollars that I pay. I am accountable to those people. I have to be accountable to the people who don't look like me, to the wars that are not close to me, to the harm that I benefit from, even if I don't cause it. As a light-skinned mixed race woman, I realized that I benefit from the harm even to my own people. And so I have to be accountable and responsible to that. We have to be accountable to the communities in which we live. I live here in Wiyot territory, and about 175 years ago, there was a massacre on Doula Island, because here on the West Coast of the United States, colonization only happened about 170 years ago. That was really when contact, we were one of the last places here in which colonization and contact came. And so, if you talk to people just 2 generations back, they remember a time in the stories from before genocide, from before contact. And it's very fresh. It's a very fresh wound here. And so the massacre on Doula Island happened in the middle of the night during the World Renewal Ceremony. So the Wiyot people come together on Doula Island, and they do a ceremony every year to renew the world, to put the world back in balance. And they pray for all people, all living beings. And about 175 years ago, they were massacred during that ceremony. And the only people who survived are the people who swam the freezing bay. We're here in the Arctic stream that comes right down from Alaska, the freezing bay, and hid in the water. About 50 years ago, one of the Wiyot elders, Cheryl Seidner, decided that she wanted the island back. And the island had become a shipyard, and it was toxic, it was poisoned. And Cheryl decided with some other Wiyot elders that it was time for the island to come home, because the way that we understand land is not in terms of time, but in terms of eternity and home. And the land to us isn't metaphorically family, it's actually family. You know, for us, all living beings are family, and we have to find our place in that family. And she decided it was time to return to that family. And she tells a story of you know, being laughed at and being told that'll take 100 years. That'll never happen. No one's ever gotten a piece of land back that's publicly owned. And Cheryl said, okay, 100 years. That seems like a good project. And I may live to see it or not, but that seems fair. And so she started having bake sales. She said, I'm gonna start having bake sales. We're gonna start and I'm gonna get the land back. And so for the last 50 years, the Wiyot people have worked to try and buy the land back and lobby for it back. And about 7 years ago, the island was returned. I always tear up at this. Please don't be put off by it. It's so beautiful to me. The ancestors, people who had done the harm, decided that they're going to be the first city in our country to ever give a piece of land back to Native people. And it was this joyful reunion. The whole community turned out. They sang and they danced, and the island was returned. And the first thing that Wiyot people did when they found out that the island was gonna come back, it had only taken 50 years, is they gathered the elders from other tribes and the elders in their tribe, and they said, we need to finish the ceremony. We're only halfway done. We need to pray for those people who hurt us. We need to pray for our ancestors. We need to pray for all the people who have come here. We need to start healing them. That's our job. And knowing how few Wiyot people there are, they rallied all of their people and all of the elders from the tribes around. And they remembered all the stories they could about their ceremonies. And they made regalia, and they carved canoes, and they lit the fire, and they gathered their elders, even the people who had been relocated back. And they finished the world renewal ceremony. And it took them, 175 years. It was nothing for them. They said, 175 years, it was just a break. We had a break in the ceremony, and now we can start it again. And so now every year they can do it. Every year they put the world back in balance and they pray for all of us. And when I think about, responsibility and my daughter and being a guest, I think about being responsible to those people who were massacred, and to the beauty of the people whose first thought when they get returned to that family is, oh, now we can heal everyone. Now we can heal the world. And don't worry, we have a 7-generation plan. We know how this can work. And so I think I'll end with this, that in our language, I said we use the word gadugi. That's one of our highest values as Cherokee people, that we work together for the betterment of all people. In my husband's the Lakota Arapaho family, they use the words omatakyase, all my relations. That's how you end every prayer, to remind yourself that you're related. Here in California, down the coast, the Chumash people speak Smuich, and my Smuich is terrible, so I'm not going to actually try to pronounce this word and butcher it. I get roasted by them every time I do. But their word for health is a verb. Health is not a noun, it's not a thing, it's not an adjective, it's a verb, it's something you do. And that verb only exists in the plural. You cannot do health by yourself as a Chumash person. We can only do health together. And it's their greeting. They say, would you like to do health together? Because we are either doing health together or we're doing unhealth together. And so, when we think of the time frame, when I think of the time frame of those words, I think archaeological records have shown that Indigenous people have been on this land where I am for about 10,000 years, but every time technological advancements happen in archaeological research, that time gets longer and longer and longer. And the elegant way that people here talk about it is they say time immemorial. And if time immemorial is this long, and maybe like right here is the burning of the Library of Alexandria, and we get farther on in time, right? If this is the time, then it's only this time right here where we've been practicing unsustainability on a really global scale. This is our industrialized time. This is the time that we've done our experiments with with capitalism and manifest destiny, and this idea that the world is an endless supply to be taken. And so if you think of all of this time in which we can be doing health together, this constant process of rupture and repair, this amount of time that we have to repair, that's nothing, right? We can do that. That's our purpose, and that's our experience to get to do together. Wado.
Thank you so much. I think everyone gathered here around this particular group and fire is touched. And so I wonder whether this would be a good time to actually have first maybe 5 minutes of journaling for all of us, and just reflection on what moved, what touched, what we can learn, and then do a breakout with 4 people for another 10 minutes. Then we should be around the quarter to the end of our time. And then we can harvest a little bit and finally give the word to Matthew, who will bring back what we gathered related to the IDGs, or whatever he feels would make most sense. Part of the journaling could be to really reflect on what is since we're all unique and brought to this earth to sing our song. What is your song for this world? And how can you best express it in whichever way that will help with that fixing, or nicer word, with that healing of all the things that have been ruptured. Is that a good idea, you two, Matthew and Lindsay? So please take a piece of paper if you have, or just go inside. Jesper, can you time us a bit?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
And take time if you can, and know the practice of free writing. Try that if you're writing, rather than trying to be consistent and sort of regular writing. Just write whatever comes without stopping your pen on the paper. Every thought that occurs, every feeling that comes, just put it down, or meditate or reflect silently. Okay? Find some way how you can sing your song and express what you received in gratitude and curiosity. And after 5 minutes, we'll go into breakout, 4 of us in a group, and have 10 minutes or so to just talk a little bit to each other. First, feel each other, become a smaller tribe, a little tribe, and see what comes up for you.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We want to offer a few minutes for us all to sort of share what we experienced in the group and what we reflected on in our journals. And so in the chat box, if you would like to share something with the broader group, you are invited now to do that. I have the unenviable task of trying to follow Suzanne and Lindsay in maybe 5 minutes of summary remarks. So I'll see what I can do, but we would like to start by offering some space for you to share. You know, going back to the question that I posed at the beginning, which really is the question that I've learned from Suzanne, which is what might we notice, embrace, and hold that has until now been beyond our field of awareness? So that's one prompt, but really anything that you would like to share from your journaling or your chat. And I know it takes a minute to write and hit enter, so we'll rest for a minute. So one comment on the value of listening, another on responsibility, sense of belonging and connectedness. And, you know, I just reflecting on the IDGs, these kinds of values are reflected there. And so, you know, how can we be grounded? How can we understand non-dual time, love, other and self, sense of love on all levels? So I think that what we have, the social container that we have experienced today is an enrichment of the exploration of the IDGs. And as I've, you know, reflected on the work of the Human Flourishing program at Harvard, both, you know, conceptual and empirical research, and also reflected on this sort of rising epidemic of youth anxiety and depression, or even just languishing. I think it might be because we have failed to notice, embrace, and hold our responsibility to balance the earth, as Lindsay so eloquently put it, and in her definition of love, to help all beings thrive. These are such powerful words, and I actually think there is some convergent thinking across cultures. This is in some ways transcultural, and I agree that many groups will not speak in terms of absolute truth, but rather in the way we do it or the way we were taught. But there is a kind of ontological interconnectedness that is revealed when we start examining the shared sacred story across groups. And, you know, I'm thinking about a wonderful article came out a few years ago in the journal Frontiers in Psychology on this very topic of ontological interconnectedness. If we force people to answer survey questions about happiness on terms that we've created, we miss this. But if we allow people around the world to use their own language to talk about the deepest forms of happiness, they speak in terms that can be understood as ontological interconnectedness. And as the authors of the article put it, all religious and philosophical traditions identify the highest stage of human development with the transcendence from the individual self by acknowledging its interconnection with a broader and more complex reality across individualistic and collectivistic countries. So however we carve up the world, east, west, north, south, across all types of countries, varying in their value orientation, this kind of deep harmony represents the core feature of happiness in both its individual and its social manifestations, as it presupposes connections or bonds with the intra and interpersonal levels. In other words, a holistic, harmonious, interconnected viewpoint brings into clear focus relationships among individual and communal flourishing, and their overlapping pathways. So this seems to be, perhaps if not an absolute truth or Platonic form, at least a transcultural aspiration, although of course not always the dominant one in every society. So as I look at the 23 skills and qualities associated with the IDGs, I see great value in drawing attention to these individual items and then putting them into a broader framework of peace or harmony or ontological interconnectedness. Certainly some of the items include connectedness and humility, and that gets us on the path. But it's perhaps too easy in many cultures to pursue these qualities in a compartmentalized way that actually makes extractive social processes worse. We know our processes are extractive because the land is degraded and people are diminished. So in other words, it's the violation of the dignity of creation, even as we have these kinds of aspirations and we're working with these skills. And so how do we integrate, as this group has been asking, how do we integrate the IDGs with the Sustainable Development Goals and with broader cultural transformation? I understand that the IDGs serve as a blueprint of inner resources that are needed in order to achieve these Sustainable Development Goals. A focus on the IDGs has the potential to inspire and empower personal development and positive collective action, but only if we create these kinds of social containers where we have broad participation by representatives from all over the world in this shared sacred story of what it means to flourish. And flourishing is always mutual. We can have extractive forms of happiness. We can seek our own well-being, but flourishing is really about well-being for well-doing for everyone. Again, bringing balance to the earth and helping all beings thrive. Is it possible for us to languish in our lives, to experience a sense of disconnection if we understand our fundamental responsibility to each other to balance the earth and to help all beings thrive? That seems very inspiring if we can find ways to connect around that core concern. The IDGs are helpful, the Sustainable Development Goals are helpful, and the kind of work that Lindsay and Suzanne have created for us today are sometimes maybe the missing ingredient there. The sharing of stories, the ways of relating, the presence that we're bringing to this work is important. Who could oppose the cultivation of some of these goals like complexity awareness, connectedness, critical thinking, integrity, learning mindset, trust, and the like? But the question really is, how do we relate to ourselves, to each other, and to the natural world in ways that actually incorporate peace, harmony, more generally into some kind of larger framework of multidimensional flourishing? So I think I'll stop there. I know we need a couple of minutes to bring this to a close, but we're really talking about the creation of a flourishing ecosystem. And flourishing suggests that we are all growing in healthy ways, individually and collectively. And, so going back to the focus of this event, growth that matters, we could say, it matters because it is bringing greater balance to the earth and helping all beings thrive. So I'm so privileged to have been part of this exploration today, and I look forward to more engagement with you all. Thank you.
Suzanne, Lindsay, Matthew, thank you so much for guiding us through this topic, and also keep on helping with how to broaden the perspectives of the IDGs, because this is the most important aspect right now. So it will be truly global. We'll hand over 1 minute, Janne. Can you do it in 1 minute, just to say something about the 29th of April?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Fatima, and thank you for this beautiful session. I was moved to tears, to be honest. 3 points first regarding the IDGs before I say one thing about the 29th. It is a communication initiative to try to communicate the research that is already out there. And I think it's important when we say inner that we understand that it doesn't mean individual or focusing on individuals only. Inner is just as much the collective. And I do agree with Matthew very strongly that the link here is truly important, not saying that we do it for our own sake, but for something larger, for the Sustainable Development Goals, for the sake of us solving the complex problems we are facing as humanity. And on the 29th of April, we have the first IDG summit ever. Dan Siegel will be one of the speakers. His new book, Intra-Connected, is about how personal development can sometimes be harmful if it's in a very individualized culture, and harmful in a sense that there are new studies showing that if we meditate in order to get well-being just for ourselves, we may lose compassion. And how dangerous the personal development trend can be if we just do it for ourselves, and the notion that health is not something we can do alone. It's a joint venture and project. Amy Edmondson will be one of our other speakers at the stage at the concert hall in Stockholm, and of course everything will be available digitally, and she will be talking about the right kind of wrong. How can we experiment and try ourselves in new ways of being, relating, and collaborating in order to solve the complex problems we're facing. And Renée Lertzman, who is a climate psychologist, she will be talking about how do we hold these challenges and how do we relate to them in a deeper way. So there will be different digital tracks. Karolinska Institute has a beautiful program and a jazz band playing for all of you digital participants. Please reach out to us if you want to create a hub. We have 40 hubs, IDG hubs coming, and we're actually collaborating with the Templeton Foundation that works a lot on human flourishing to start 5 nodes, including one in Costa Rica, one in Rwanda, one probably in Greece, where we will start programs for people in government to work with the research available to see if we can enhance capacities to better tackle the global challenges we are facing. I really hope we will see you on the 29th of April. Hold the date and more information will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Johan.
Yes.
And Jesper.
Yes.
And thank you all participants for joining today. We are 2 minutes over the time, but if you wish, there is an opportunity to stay now and talk a little bit more.
Yeah. So, but just to conclude, I think just to give everybody a very short voice in this, turn on your microphones, and why not say thank you in your own language to conclude this.
Thank you, gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Tack så mycket.
Tack.
Hej.
Tack och hej.